At 65, Simon Cowell's life is far more complex than the image the public has carried for decades. To millions, he is the sharp-tongued judge in a black t-shirt, the man who could dismantle a dream with a raised eyebrow or a cutting remark, the figure of authority whose very presence seemed to dominate television screens and, in many ways, global pop culture itself. But behind the carefully curated persona of power, precision, and unrelenting judgment lies a man whose life has been marked by a series of profound challenges, private tragedies, and moments of personal reckoning that the cameras never captured. While Simon Cowell's career is widely recognized as a masterclass in ambition, reinvention, and influence, the untold story reveals a man scarred, shaped, and ultimately humanized by experiences that fame, money, and status could never fully shield him from. Childhood, the perfectly imperfect home. Simon Cowell was born in London in 1959 into a household that, to outsiders, seemed idyllic. His mother, Julie, carried the elegance of a professional ballet dancer, moving through life with grace and poise. His father, Eric, was a music executive whose career afforded the family a comfortable lifestyle, complete with social circles that included artists, producers, and cultural influencers of the day. From the outside, it appeared as though Simon had grown up surrounded by privilege and opportunity. The family home was neat, orderly, and outwardly harmonious. But appearances, as Simon would come to understand early in life, were deceptive. Inside the house, affection was measured, conditional, and at times elusive. Eric Cowell, successful in his own right, was a man of few words when it came to praise, rarely expressing verbal affirmations of love. Julie, while elegant and disciplined, maintained a certain emotional distance, likely a product of her own upbringing and professional focus. For young Simon, the home was a paradox, full of opportunity, yet emotionally sparse. Approval wasn't freely given. It had to be earned, and Simon felt he was perpetually striving for recognition that never fully arrived. The message was subtle but clear. Worth was tied to achievement, not intrinsic value. School offered little reprieve. Simon attended Radlett Preparatory and later Dover College, where his restless energy often put him at odds with teachers and peers alike. Unlike classmates who excelled academically or socially, Simon felt marginalized, often hovering on the edges of attention. He was neither celebrated nor fully understood, and each perceived failure, whether a poor grade, a missed opportunity, or a social misstep, weighed heavily, reinforcing a sense of invisibility. In interviews decades later, Simon reflected that the silence of his father haunted him more than any verbal critique ever could. It was a formative wound, a feeling that love and approval were perpetually just beyond reach. That achievement was the only pathway to being seen. These early experiences, painful as they were, sowed the seeds of a relentless ambition that would define his professional life. The boy who felt unseen would grow into a man determined never to be invisible again. The struggle to break in, mailrooms and minor roles. Simon's first steps into the music industry were, ironically, a stark reminder of the very invisibility he had grown up with. He began at EMI, one of Britain's most prominent record companies, performing menial tasks, sorting fan letters, making coffee for executives, and observing from the sidelines as producers, artists, and decision-makers navigated a world that seemed perpetually just out of reach. For a young man already grappling with feelings of inadequacy and longing for acknowledgement, these were grueling years. I was invisible in a world obsessed with the spotlight. Simon later admitted, each day reinforced a painful reality. He had no power, no name recognition, and no platform to influence or create. There were moments of quiet despair in office bathrooms, stolen minutes where he could allow himself to acknowledge the gap between where he was and where he wanted to be. Yet these early humiliations did more than frustrate him. They taught him the mechanics of power. He began studying not just music, but the systems, hierarchies, and dynamics that allowed some to rise while others remained unnoticed. Humiliation hardened him, but it also provided a critical education that would inform his approach to business, talent, and eventually, television. Early success, sudden failure, and the lessons of hunger. In the 1980s, Simon made his first independent move by founding Fanfare Records. This small label offered him a taste of autonomy, creativity, and for a brief moment, success. Pop singles such as So Macho captured attention, and Simon tasted the intoxicating thrill of recognition. Parties, champagne, and the fleeting validation that he had long sought. For the first time, he felt as though he belonged, not on the margins, but at the center of the action. But the music business is famously fickle. Trends shifted, sales faltered, and by the late 1980s, Fanfare Records folded. Simon found himself back in the confines of his parents' home, occupying the same bedroom he had once dreamt of escaping. Friends disappeared, creditors pressed, and the second phase of invisibility struck, this time not as a beginner, but as a perceived failure. That nearly broke me, Simon reflected years later. Yet even in the depths of despair, he discovered a hunger that success alone could never instill, a desire not merely to be recognized, but to command influence and leave a lasting mark. Reinvention at BMG, mastering the market. The 1990s marked Simon's strategic return to the music industry, this time with a more calculated approach at BMG. Rather than pursuing artistic acclaim or timeless acts, Simon shifted his focus to the pulse of ordinary audiences. His philosophy was pragmatic and unapologetically commercial. Sell records first. Earn respect later by signing acts that critics often dismissed, Robson and Jerome, Westlife, Five. Simon demonstrated an acute understanding of mass appeal. Popularity, he realized, was not an enemy to be scorned, but a tool to be harnessed. Emotion sold. Perfection did not. Every act, every hit, single, became another brick in the empire he was quietly constructing. An empire that would eventually extend beyond music to television. The rise of a television titan, Simon Cowell's transition to television transformed him into a global figure. When Pop Idol premiered in 2001, many producers doubted his suitability for the small screen. They feared his bluntness, his unapologetic critique, and his seemingly cold demeanor would alienate viewers. Yet the opposite occurred. Audiences embraced Simon not despite his candor, but because of it. His pauses, eyebrow raises, and biting judgments became as central to the show's drama as the contestants' performances. By 2002, American Idol had made him a household name in the United States, and the empire grew with franchises such as The X Factor and Got Talent spreading across more than 100 countries. Simon Cowell had become a cultural force, a man whose approval could launch careers, whose critique could destroy dreams, and whose presence was synonymous with power in popular culture. The burden of fame and isolation. Yet with influence came isolation. Simon's public persona, the ruthless judge, the feared critic, was a shield that protected him professionally but exposed him emotionally. Contestants wept under his scrutiny, tabloids cast him as a villain, and audiences alternated between adulation and disdain. Behind closed doors, the laughter of television studios gave way to the silence of a private life, marked by exhaustion, relentless schedules, and an absence of authentic connection. The boy who once craved affection now found that power could not substitute for intimacy or peace. Scandal and redemption. Fatherhood as transformation. In 2013, Simon's carefully managed image faced a profound upheaval. News emerged that he was expecting a child, Eric, with Lauren Silverman, the wife of a close friend. The public reaction was swift and unforgiving, portraying Simon as betrayer and pariah. Friendships dissolved, reputations were questioned, and he confronted a harsh public reckoning. Yet fatherhood became a catalyst for transformation. Eric's birth in 2014 softened Simon's worldview, grounding him in a reality beyond contracts, ratings, and acclaim. The man who had once prioritized empire over empathy now measured success in bedtime stories, Lego towers, and the quiet joys of parenting. "Eric saved me," Simon reflected, acknowledging a shift in priorities from power to presence. Tragedy and mortality, accidents and loss. Even as fatherhood provided stability, life reminded Simon of its fragility. His mother passed in 2015, removing a silent anchor from his life. Subsequent accidents, including a violent e-bike crash in Malibu in 2020 that shattered his spine, and another in 2022 that left him bruised and broken, brought him face to face with mortality. Surgeons implanted rods, and doctors warned he might never fully recover. A stark contrast to the invincible image the public had long held. These moments of vulnerability reminded Simon that control is illusory, and even those who appear untouchable are profoundly human. Cosmetic struggles and self-perception amid the pressures of television and public scrutiny, Simon had long relied on cosmetic enhancements to maintain his signature image. Subtle Botox and fillers eventually became conspicuous, drawing public commentary and memes. The irony was unmistakable. The judge who had spent decades evaluating others' appearances now faced judgment himself. Recognizing the toll on both identity and authenticity, Simon ceased cosmetic procedures, embracing the reality of aging as a natural and necessary shift, valuing presence over perfection. The pain of mentorship and loss. In 2024, Simon Cowell confronted one of the most devastating personal losses of his life. The death of Liam Payne, a young man he had guided from a timid, unsure teenager into a global superstar as part of the phenomenon that was One Direction. For Simon, the bond went far beyond the professional relationship of manager and artist. He had watched Liam grow, navigate the pressures of fame, and find his own voice in the spotlight. Over nearly a decade, their connection had become paternal in nature. Simon's mentorship carried the weight of guidance, protection, and ultimately, deep emotional investment. Payne's untimely death hit Simon with the force of personal grief, akin to losing a son. The pain was raw, private, and all-encompassing, reminding him that no amount of success, acclaim, or material wealth could shield him from life's fragility. It was a moment that underscored a profound truth. The most important measures in life are not awards, ratings, or charts, but the intangible bonds of love, presence, and human connection. In that grief, Simon was reminded that mentorship carries profound responsibility and deep emotional risk, and that sometimes the heart pays the heaviest price for investing in another's growth and dreams. Legacy and reflection at 65. At 65, Simon Cowell stands as a figure far more nuanced than the public persona that made him famous. He is no longer defined solely by his sharp critiques, his black t-shirts, or the empire of television shows he built from the ground up. Instead, he is a survivor, a man who has navigated childhood wounds, professional setbacks, personal scandals, and life-threatening accidents, emerging with a deeper understanding of what truly matters. The boy who once craved affection and recognition has grown into a man who values presence, connection, and love above all else. Fatherhood has reshaped Simon in ways that fame never could. The birth of his son, Eric, brought a sense of purpose and grounding that softened the ruthless edges of a man long defined by ambition and power. Bedtime stories, quiet moments of play, and the simple joy of seeing a child flourish have offered him a clarity that no television rating or chart-topping record ever could. Simultaneously, personal tragedies, the death of his mother, near-fatal accidents, and the shocking loss of Liam Payne have reminded him of life's fragility and the limits of control. These experiences forced him to confront vulnerability, mortality, and the necessity of slowing down in a world that had once demanded relentless drive. At this stage in life, Simon's legacy is no longer just the stars he discovered or the shows he created. It is the story of survival, reinvention, and human resilience. His journey reflects the complex interplay between ambition, loss, and personal growth, revealing that even those who seem untouchable carry battles unseen by the public. Simon Cowell's life at 65 is a testament not to power or fame alone, but to the enduring strength of the human spirit and the wisdom gained through hardship.